G'day folks, and welcome back to part 2 of our conversation with Dr. John Simpson, a visionary leader who has helped create the world of percutaneous coronary and peripheral intervention that we know today. In this episode, we'll dive deeper into the impact he has had on so many people important to medical technology. You are well recognized for your persistence, and I'd say sort of dogged determination. That come from your Texas roots? Where's that come from?
I think that the whole concept of persevering is like my only option, because I'm not particularly spontaneous, just that my first effort always works. That just has never really quite happened to me. So
how else would you describe yourself? Sorry, that was a setup.
A little crazy.
Yeah. Crazy as in, I know you're having a bit of fun, but to be able to see some of the things that you've seen, you have to be a little different there, right?
Well, so the other side of this, maybe this goes back to you can do better than this. There were always events with devices that most of the time nobody got hurt, but there were times when it was just sort of grossly embarrassing. Mm-hmm. That you mean this is this device, we thought it was going to be perfect and it didn't even work at all, kind of a thing. And maybe out of trying to recover from this terrible outcomes, in a way, it sort of drives perseverance. I mean, what are you going to do? You going to quit? So I know that part I'm probably not very good at, that quit part. So
yeah, just thank goodness. We're talking about things not going right when you're doing early clinical work with a new therapy. I think it's important for the young innovators or the young physicians that are listening to this, that is a part of what we do, right? Mm-hmm. That unfortunately there are times when devices aren't going to work. How do you deal with that? And how
that's I think a really, really good question. I have to tell a story about I just could not believe this device. We're in Germany. We deployed the Perclose device to close the hole in the patient's arterial access site, and it got stuck. And it's not coming out. The needles are not deploying. Nothing is, it is stuck. He has to go to surgery. The surgeons have to go in and almost like excise the artery to take it out. And I said to myself, this is never happening again. And so that's kind of it's a little bit of the thing that you ask, how do you kind of persevere? How do you not persevere? Are you kidding? You deployed something and it got stuck in the patient and you had to have a surgeon take it out? And if you're an interventional cardiologist, the surgeons, you don't want to ever have to rely on the surgeon. Dr. Fogarty would give you a hard time about that. So I think perseverance is one thing, but I think part of it is if you're committed to making this something work, then you better make it work.
Isn't that that's a better term, I think. It's commitment, right? That you're committed to making it work. You're committed to the patient. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. That a story that you developed the knot tying sequence for Perclose while you were on a fishing trip in Montana. Is that true?
Idaho, right? So,
good.
So it's fascinating. So serendipity is the wrong term, I think, but I don't know. So I guess you have to, when you hear something like that, you have to be able to try. I'm struggling with the word. Interpret it in a way that it's going to lead to something that's going to have an outcome. Mm-hmm. And so Dick Hunter, who's an anesthesiologist at Stanford at the time, is fishing. We're fishing together on the Big Wood River in outside of Ketchum, Idaho. And so we're tying the knots, and he's done more fly fishing than I have. And I'm talking to him about Perclose and how we're struggling a lot with the knot that we're using to tie the sutures, and it's not always working at the time. And so he looks at me and he says, "You're kidding." And I said, "No." He said, "Well, why are you not tying the clinch knot that we're tying on the flies? They never slip." I go, Why are we not? I don't know, or not, but maybe we should. He said, I think you should. And that is the clinch knot. And I think it's a double clinch knot now that's in the pre-tied version of the Perclose device. But I mean, in a way, in a retrospect, it was so obvious because it worked so well. But, you know, I don't know. I guess a lot of people were fly fishing that were looking at Perclose. No one else kind of took that ball and ran with it, so to speak.
Yeah. All right. So now the fun one, and I think this guy might be in the room, is mentorship and mentoring and coaching is incredibly important to the folks here at Fogarty, and a lot of it comes from Tom. From our perspective, that's always been a drive from him. Who would you? I mean, you've spoken about a few people that if you're going back 40 years, 20 years, going back a little way, you've been talking about some of the guys that influenced you getting into college and everything else. So you still remember that. Who have been the influential mentors for you?
Well, so it's kind of an interesting mentor because Andreas Grunzig, who invented the concept of angioplasty, was, in a way, we were kind of competitive, but we also kind of fed off of each other. He thought this movable guide wire was not important. He thought the distal pressure measurements inside the artery were more important. And I sort of kind of thought the reverse. And I think maybe it's a competition too. We haven't talked too much about that, but maybe he wanted to show that his was better, and I wanted to show him that mine was. I don't know, but he was also a mentor. Now I think a mentor, not so much that we worked closely together, but he was obsessed with patient outcomes. He verbalized that at every conference that he ever gave. And that fit really nicely into my thinking as well, as I had always shared those same feelings. And so I felt like we had kind of a kinship, but we're also competitors, if you will. But then also I had some very, very good instruction at Stanford. Ed Alderman, Lou Wexler were two of the really, really good professors that were very good at doing angiography. And at that time, it's kind of interesting because Stanford was transitioning from a phase where only radiologists could do coronary angiography. Cardiologists were not allowed to do it.
I saw something that you'd written about the character that's sitting over here, about him being a business mentor. Was that real?
Well, everybody aspires to be as good as Tom Fogarty from a business perspective. But I think that Tom, also because everybody aspires to accomplish as much maybe as Tom does, Fogarty's influenced a lot of things in my life, but more than business, he influenced the patient outcome side of my equation. So that's the key thing.
Yeah, before you mentioned that Grunzig had focused on patient outcome, I know that's a Tom saying around
Absolutely.
Here, patient first.
If you do something really special for the patient, I've always said you have a great chance of building a good business around it. Maybe not, but your best chance of doing it is that way.
So I think I mentioned before that we've done now quite a number of these interviews, and every single interview, someone has mentioned you and the impact you've had on them.
But he was a very different person. He is a brilliant doctor and perfectionist, and so he's just, to me, is just a very interesting guy because he's such so into and thank God he is to building a product that really can solve all of the problems with regard to that procedure. So he's just a brilliant visionary.
I'm just passing on the collective wisdom of everyone else. Standing on the shoulders of giants, as we've talked, like Tom Fogarty and Alan Will and John Simpson.
So you've had an impact on many, many lives. How would you describe your mentoring style? Do you see yourself as a mentor?
I have a philosophy. My philosophy is you hire really good people better than you are, and give them general direction, but not try to interfere with what they do really, really well. And I know the thing that I think I'm really good at is finding people and then getting out of their way. I think, unfortunately, a lot of physicians that to kind of try to do what I try to do, think that they can, not only can they find good people, but then they can also do it.
Yeah.
And there's no chance, that's a very realistic option, I think, for most people. And maybe Tom might be the exception to that. But I think my style is one of sort of general encouragement. Probably if I have a flaw, it may be that I'm not, some things that I probably could be a little bit more hard-nosed about, we're not doing that anymore. Mm-hmm. I sometimes will let it go a little bit to see that it's kind of not working, to prove the point, mm-hmm. not in a patient, but in the research and development phase. And so I probably have been criticized for that. Why'd you let that go so long?
No, that's the flip side of the persistence or the commitment, right? That's the other side of that. So. I mean, the feedback we've got during these discussions is you're a charismatic leader. And still
that is shocking.
No, it's true. Charismatic leader, and that you, like absolutely. And I think that that part of your mentorship style is leading. It is showing others the way, mm-hmm. rather than having those sorts of conversations. So as you said, it's hiring the right people, mm-hmm. And then allowing them to see. Not allowing them, it's just them getting the chance to watch you do. All right. So we've spoken about your drive, right? Your persistence and your commitment, and I would quite say your commitment to excellence here. We borrow the Raiders thing.
John Simpson, honestly, was very. He's the inventor of ACS's business and the product, et cetera. He spent his time, with the R&D people there, not really in the boardroom where I would have had a chance to really meet him and get to know him at the at that very first company in the very early years.
But you're also, that charismatic people person as well. I've got Paul Yock. It's partly that he's a folksy sort of guy and a very friendly guy. Casey. He spent his time with the R&D people, right? Not necessarily in the boardroom, not necessarily in other places. Is that an apt description of you?
Yeah, Casey in particular, I think, is an apt description. He knows that I hate board meetings, that I sort of hate meetings of generally of any kind. I want to be in the lab where we're making the devices better.
That you were always in the lab.
Yeah.
You're always in the lab.
Drove people crazy. There's a meeting. That's okay. John's in the meeting. Is he in the meeting? No. Where's John? It just drove everybody nuts. But I don't know. I just felt like I could make a difference in the lab. I could not make any difference in the meetings. Never. That's probably an exaggeration.
No, that's not true. But yeah.
But it just didn't seem like. I just felt like the people that were in the meetings were better at it than I was, and I was a lot better at it in the lab than they were.
Yeah, there you go.
And so I've said forever, if inside an artery, if we're inside an artery, I've got you. You're not going to fool me inside an artery. Inside a boardroom and a P&L and a balance sheet, that's not my strength. You've got me. You guys figure that out.
I've got another quote here that people said that you've been the founder of the medtech industry.
That's exciting, and it really derives back to some of the charismatic people. But that's the whole field. That's what Grunzig was, and that's what John Simpson has been, and that's what Jeff Hartzler was, and that's so many of the characters who became very charismatic individuals. It took that pioneering spirit to really bring things forward.
When you read about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, they were the right people, the right time to create this whole computer industry. But honestly, in the world of medical devices, you look at Paul Yock, you look at Ron Dollins, you look at John Simpson. I mean, they have made this medical device industry, and it's absolutely comparable in my mind to what happened with the computers, and equally important, if not even more so, because it's healthcare.
Well, that's quite a compliment, and I accept it as a compliment. It's not exaggerated. Charisma is kind of an interesting thing, isn't it? Do we any of us really know exactly kind of what it is? I would say that Grunzig was really very, very charismatic, and I think all of the rest of us in a way kind of pale compared to his, sort of charismatic way that he approached things. I think of charisma seems like that's just the antithesis of sort of who I am. But I will say this, that I do try to be authentic.
Yeah.
And I'm not pretending, I'm really not pretending that I'm somebody that I'm not. But I'm a pretty hard worker and pretty conscientious,
But I think that's what it is, right?
So that's the
people are drawn to folks who are authentic, who are who they are, right? And don't pretend. And I absolutely see that in you. Mm-hmm. You are who you are. That seem fair?
Yeah. Take it or leave it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, sorry.
You may not like this, but you may want to much more. Some of my kids have sometimes gone to some of my presentations, and they say, "Dad, please don't embarrass us by making some of the making it too folksy." And so I recently received an award in Washington D.C. and two of my daughters just going up to the podium to get the award says, "Dad, don't do that kind of folksy stuff, okay?" I did anyways.
So this one I'm not too sure I can actually believe, given the conversation we just had and about the laid back nature of John Simpson. But Paul York gave us this one. As an example of the wow factor you produced, some of the younger physicians in those days remember how well you dramatically drive up onto the sidewalk at the lecture hall in a flashy sports car with the license plate Plaque Man. Really?
So the flashy sports car was a tiny little Alfa Romeo convertible, which was the least, it was red, so red made it flashy, I suppose, but it was not that special. And then Plaque Man, because I was taking plaque out of arteries, I thought that was really cool. I'd get a license plate that said Plaque Man, because I'm removing plaque, and then everybody that saw it thought I was a dentist. So I took it off.
I was going to say, how long did that last?
After about a year, I got a new one.
Yeah. So hopefully, we've got a ton of young folks who are watching this, and what would you like to pass on? If to someone who's starting their career, what lesson or lessons?
I think in any career, it doesn't have to be medicine or anything. It gets back to deciding, what your goals are and finding a way to commit to that. Yeah, I think for me it's a little bit all-consuming, and sometimes I think that might have been excessive. But maybe commit to a balanced way to achieve something special, identify it, and then work your butt off to make it happen. And assume that you're going to fail all the time, and after each failure, be able to find a way to make up for that and to fix it. That's why I would say I keep going back to the guy that said to me, every day you have to work to improve the approximation to the truth. So I keep thinking that that's still a really good, sound advice, knowing full well you'll never get there, but that you could be closer. You should be closer, tomorrow than you are today. And perseverance is absolutely a term that has to. Sometimes I think perseverance sounds like you're doing it to the exclusion of all the other important things and people around you, which I think would not be good. But persevering to the point where you can really make a difference. I would suppose at any profession to make a difference.
At anything.
To make a difference. To be committed to making a difference at what you're doing. Hey, that would be one way to say it. I don't know if that's very concise, but
well, I think there's always nuance, right? And I think you just taught me something there. What made you great, what made you so impactful, was not accepting the status quo, right? Which was you did something. It's that approximation that there is no perfect. You've got to continue to strive for perfect. What's next? Next for you.
Well, I still believe in like you say, like I've been trying to say, making things better, and I think there's a movement in our industry moving more toward imaging. using some combination of maybe ultrasound, maybe OCT, maybe trying to reduce the reliance on fluoroscopy and radiation exposure. And so, technologies that would facilitate that, I think, are going to be important in the future. And so I think that's I want to keep working on some technologies. I do want to improve my golf game, which sucks. My wife, I told you all the other things about her that are really good, but she's also a really good golfer, which is a stress for me. That's what you don't know about John Simpson. Every time his wife beats him at golf, it's just painful.
But allegedly, you're actually not just an inventor in the setting of medical therapies, but did you really come up with a basketball retrieval machine?
This is going to be trouble if my wife ever sees this basketball machine. Was not her favorite endeavor. My son was, as a kid, was not a very good basketball player, and I was trying to rebound for him all the time, and I said, this sucks, I'm not going to do this. This is either he's got to learn how to shoot, because I'm not going to learn how to rebound. So we developed this thing, a basketball retrieval machine. It actually still exists. The people that are making it still.
How does it work?
So it's just like you can envision a big net underneath the basket, and you have to shoot over that net to make the basket, and then the net funnels it back down to a machine that throws the ball back to you.
Yeah, perfect. And you really invented that.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. But I think your son must have learned a lot, right, to go on to become
he got
on the
better.
Duke NCAA championship team. So
no, he did. I credit all of that to my machine.
Yeah, that's what
and he's trying to take some credit for it himself. I think that's just ridiculous. It was all my machine.
That's a good way to leave this.
There you go.
Especially if she gets to see this after the last conversation. All right. Thanks, John, very much.
Yes,
really appreciate it.
This has been fun. Yes, good.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on MedTech Trailblazers. We hope you enjoyed learning new things about another impact maker in our industry. Do join me again for future episodes in our series by subscribing to this podcast. Please also like and/or share our content with your colleagues. Again, I can't believe I'm saying that. We want to hear back from you with names of medtech leaders that you believe are trailblazers and whom we should consider having on the show. Until next time, I'll leave you with my usual parting thoughts from Hannibal of Carthage that should resonate with all of us trying to make a difference for patients worldwide. And that is, I'll either find a way or make one. Cheers.